Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Johns Hopkins School of Education, Doctor of Education, EdD Student Panel Virtual Webinar. My name is Tanya McMillan, and I am an admissions coordinator here at the School of Education. Also joining me today, I have my colleague from the Office of Admissions, and she will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sion John. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions here at the Johns Hopkins School of Education. Welcome, everyone.
Before we get started today, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping topics. First, today's webinar is being recorded. We'll be able to share a link via email with you after the event is complete. Also, please take a quick moment to see if your microphone is on mute right now and video cameras off at all times during today's presentation. Next, I'd like to share the agenda for today's virtual webinar. We will begin by introducing our EdD faculty lead, Dr. Carrie Bukowski, and our EdD student panelists. Then we'll have a question and answer session facilitated by Dr. Bukowski and our student panelists. Please type your questions in the Q&A box, and keep in mind that we will be stopping our webinar today at 5 p.m. If there are questions that have not been answered, please reach out to the admissions department or the EdD program office, and that contact information will be provided in the last slide at the end of our presentation today. Now, to introduce our faculty, Dr. Carrie Bukowski is an associate professor and the faculty lead for the Doctor of Education program. Dr. Bukowski joined our faculty in 2016. She received her PhD at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and her EdD at the Johns Hopkins School of Education. Dr. Bukowski's research focus is cultivating connection, community, and belonging in our learning spaces. Lastly, Dr. Bukowski received the Johns Hopkins School of Education Teaching Award in 2019, the Bloomberg School of Public Health Excellence in Teaching Award in 2016, and Faculty Award for Service Learning in 2015. We also have 4 EdD student panelists joining us today as well, and I'll introduce them now. First, Dr. Noelle Emilius is a 2021 graduate of our EdD program and specialized in urban leadership. She currently teaches 10th grade English in the DC public school system. Tanya Satchel is a current EdD student specializing in online teaching and learning. Tanya currently works as the Deputy Director of the Ideals Institute in Maryland. Next, Shonda Turner is a current EdD student specializing in online teaching and learning. Shonda is currently employed as the Director of Curriculum and Staff Development in a pre-K through 12 public school. And I'm sorry, her specialization is mind, brain, and teaching. I do apologize for that. And also joining us is Dr. Jeffrey Golubchik. Dr. Golubchik is a 2021 graduate of our EdD program and specialized in entrepreneurship and education. He currently works as a K-12 school administrator. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I will now hand the floor over to Dr. Bukowski. She will be facilitating our EdD student panel questions and answers today. Welcome, Dr. Bukowski.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here and so excited to see 2 of our graduates and students. You know, as an online program, we don't always get together, so it's cool to be here in this space. So we're going to ask questions of the panelists. And panelists, I would just encourage you, don't feel like you have to answer every question, but we'll go through them and just share with others who are here. So the first 2 questions are related, and that is, what appealed to you most about the EdD program at Hopkins? And then why did you choose our School of Education at Hopkins? So anybody want to get us started?
I can start, Dr. Bukowski.
Great, thanks, Jeffrey.
Yeah, so the program was remote, but still rigorous, which I very much appreciated. Other programs that I had looked at there were some that were equally rigorous, but they had an in-person component. At the time when I applied, I also had newborn twins that were 6 months old when I started. And then when I really started to dig deeper, the reputation of the School of Education at Johns Hopkins is so highly regarded, as are the faculty, such as Dr. Borkowski, who's with us today. And it really was the right fit.
Great, thanks, Jeffrey. Anybody else want to share?
I can chime in and just echo exactly what Jeffrey just said. I was looking for a program that was fully online and at a place that had a good reputation and a rigorous program. And this program just fit all of the fit all of those check marks.
Perfect. Thanks, Tanya. Shanda or Noel, anything else to add?
Sure. I think, of course, what's been said already is really important, but I know for me, I didn't have the means to be able to stop everything and do a doctorate program full time while not working. So I was really looking for programs that were amenable to and supported people who were still working full time. And so when I looked into this program, I realized that since it's an applied dissertation, that not only would my full-time job be acknowledged, but it would also be supported and I could talk to people about it, and the schedule would be flexible because everyone around me would also continue to have a full-time job.
Great. Thanks, Noel. And yeah, I'm hearing, hopefully folks who are listening in, you're hearing some themes come across from these folks' responses, and that is, Jeffrey was talking about having twins, and Tanya Noel also mentioned the rigor as well as the professional obligations. And so the next two questions are really related to that. And that is, in your own experience, how much time per week did you spend, or are you spending for Tanya and Shanda, who are still in the program, studying?
I'll jump in on this one. I'm so glad you sent the questions ahead of time, because I really have thought over this one a lot.
Yeah.
It definitely ebbs and flows. So there are definitely times where there's more work to do and less work to do. But I would say if I had to average it out over my first 2.5 years, I would say that I feel most comfortable when I can put in at least 1 hour a day plus a full day on the weekend. So there are times where it's less than that. There are times where it feels like it's more than that, but I feel like I'm in a good pace if I can pay at least a little bit of attention each work day and then have like one good chunk on the weekend to crank out some work.
Thank you, Shanda, for that. That I think sort of situating it within the week like that is really helpful for folks who are not in the program. Anybody else have a thought on that?
I would completely agree. I think that I also appreciate getting the questions ahead of time. I wrote about 15 hours in a week where there's a paper due and discussion prompts. So that is about an hour a day plus, a 5 or 6 hour day on a weekend.
Agreed. Tanya or Noel, anything to add?
Yep, I would agree. I mean, I wrote down at least 2 to 4 hours a week for reading alone, reading and discussion posts. And then there's, at least one day during the weekend where I'm just fully dedicated to either coursework or working on a chapter in my dissertation. Yep.
Great. Thank you for that. A related question is around both the support and the interactions with both your faculty advisors and then students in cohorts. So can you just talk a little bit about the support you receive from faculty and then those interactions with students?
I can jump in on this. It's ironic that Jeffrey is here because he was one of the people in my cohort that I was on the phone with at least once a day, trying to work things out. I think the support that I received, not only obviously from people in my own urban leadership specialization, but people across in different specializations who are the same year as me. People in my professional setting didn't get it. And I needed people in the program who really understood what it was like to be a full-time student and a full-time professional at the same time, and sort of reminding each other of due dates or posts. But I think The other important thing to highlight here, which is something that I wasn't expecting from this program that I have recommended to everyone 10 times over, is the support that I received from the professors in this program. I know that I received my dissertation, I did my dissertation in July, and I'm still in regular contact with my advisor. We meet regularly still just to catch up and talk, and the really unbelievable resources that I never imagined I would have had.
Thanks, Noelle. Other thoughts on this?
I agree with Noelle, and I would just maybe share sort of two pieces of advice I've been given. I think Dr. Pape said it, but Dr. Karp says it to me all the time, and that is that they don't apologize for the rigor in this program, but they provide you with the support to get through it. And I think that is so true, and they live it, not just talking it. So tons of support. And then the other thing is I was able to go to an in-person orientation, and one of the people at my table said, find your person. You got to find your person in this program. And I was lucky enough to find my person plus some other people. And that has been a really important, I think, thing to do. You have to, in this program, you have to actively seek out your peers to have that support. And I think those people who didn't do that struggled a little bit more. So your peers are there for you, and it's an incredible little sort of group little family you end up with, but you do have, you have to go seek it out.
Thanks, Shanda. Anybody else want to hop
Yeah,
in?
I'll add that when I applied for the program, one of the things that I remember having to do was submit a letter from someone in your master's program. And I also did my master's online. And I remember thinking, I don't know those people. They don't know me because it was all online. But this program is the exact opposite of that. And I think just a small testament to that is that Carrie is able to recognize our voices without our video. So that just gives you a little bit of an example of how much connection that we have with the professors, and again, with other people in the cohort. I've definitely connected with people that I know will be friends and colleagues well after the diploma has been received.
I would agree as well. The program is such a huge support mechanism, and my advisor said early on that this program will change my life, and it really has in terms of pushing my thinking in so many ways. So I'm so appreciative to that.
Well, I'm just a shameless plug. That just heartens me to hear the connections, because that really is part of the goal and mission of the program. So it's good to hear that reflected back to us. Shanda, you mentioned the orientation, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I would just love for folks who've attended orientation, whether in person or virtually, can you just talk a little bit about your experience in the orientation? What was that like?
Yeah, so I was able to do, our orientation was this summer before lockdown happened. So we were lucky enough to get that in. And it just was such a great opportunity to put faces with names and meet people. So there was someone at my table that I became very good friends with. She's in a different specialization and stuff. And we text all the time, and just having that connection was really nice. And then we sort of figured out who's in the Northeast, and we sort of got contact information so we could sort of do this, regional connection piece. And they just give you lots of different opportunities to find similarities with different people, and to do that, and just to start to wrap your brain around what this process means. So really, whether it's virtual or in person, I strongly, strongly recommend people take the time to participate, because they take the time to walk you through all the things you need to know about how this program works and the steps you have to take and what you have to do and how to do it. It was just a really, really useful process. And I still go back to some of those videos sometime, because I'm like, wait, what did they say about this thing that I now have to do? It's there. So it's really, really helpful. I highly recommend people participate.
Building off of that, I also went back to especially when I started, when going into the third year, I went back to my notes from the first orientation that was for us was in person, and really looking at what I had written in terms of the chapter 5, and everything aligned with what I was then being told with my advisor. So it was really great having that information up front. And just to Carrie's point, it really was where connections started. It was the building blocks of all of the connections throughout the program.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Noelle or Tanya, anything to add?
I mean, I'd just echo what folks have already said. Definitely, I was also able to attend orientation, well, a residency in person, and just making the connections, finding your people. You'll find you have different groups of people for different reasons. So my background is in early childhood, so I found the people in our program that are in early childhood. I've, have people that are in my specialization, have people that, you just kind of have become personal friends with. So you'll have different groups of people for different reasons, but definitely, finding your tribe will be important.
Absolutely. And I'll say, as a faculty member, residency, I mean, certainly face-to-face, but even virtual is one of our favorite parts of the program. And I still remember meeting the folks on this call at residency. So it's a good memories. So I want to residency, especially for first year students, is critically important to onboarding and transitioning to the program. So if we took a step back, and most of these students who are here, these prospective students, are in the process of either thinking about admission or in the process of completing their application. So if you could give like a piece of advice to prospective students interested in this program, in our EdD program, what might that be?
Okay, I'll jump in. I was going to try to be quiet for a second, but it's not my strength.
No
So I've said this to Carrie many, many times, and my biggest advice coming into the program, as well as you go through the program, is trust the process. I think, having a true problem of practice, trusting the process of how they work you through your learning and the courses. There's a reason for everything they do. And you sometimes don't see it at first. And then you get on the other side and you go, oh, I see what you did there. So I would just, really encourage everyone to just kind of lean in and trust the process. And that you will yield the benefits.
Yeah, I want to hop on. Shonda actually said before, one of the pieces of advice I had was like, find your people, find at least one person in the program that you can work through this with. But I think the other thing is, I found that at this level of education, a lot of people are perfectionists. I am definitely a perfectionist. And so one of the hardest lessons for me to learn in this program was that I am shockingly not perfect. And I have to be okay with being uncomfortable and being vulnerable, and be okay with asking for help and sort of just putting my whole self out there in order to receive the resources and help that I needed.
And to that end, I would add just being really open to feedback and in order to push your own thinking.
Great. Thanks to all of you for those responses. So just to get in the weeds a little bit, in the previous webinars, Noelle, Jeffrey, Tanya, and Shanda, we've had some questions around the executive sponsor. So I'm wondering if any of you could share just your brief process on how you identified your executive sponsor.
I work. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
No, you sure? You can start.
All right. Well, so that we don't go back and forth, I'll keep going and just say that for me it was relatively easy because I work in a research center. So my direct supervisor knew my work. He knew the capacity that I would need to be able to really explore my problem of practice. So it was relatively easy for me to identify him as being my executive sponsor. I know that there are sometimes when you get into different school systems and things like that, it might be a little bit more challenging, but for me that was relatively simple.
I had a similar experience. It was a small district. And so I just had a series of conversations with my superintendent who had a doctorate and my assistant superintendent, and just a lot of conversations around the work that I would do and what I was thinking at the application time, what the problem of practice could be. And so that really was where I started, and they were fully supportive of that. But I know that it's probably different in a larger district.
Actually, so I can speak to that as a public school teacher in a larger district. I was much more strategic about it. I know that my district has a very long process for approval for any sort of studies. And so I went right to the approval process online, read through the website and looked to see what were the steps and who did I need approval from. And the first level of approval I needed was my principal. And so I went and asked my principal to be the executive sponsor so that I knew right away I had that step down. I didn't have to worry about that in year 2 or year 3.
Great. Thank you for those responses. I was wondering, so part of the admissions process, as you know, and then continuing in year 1 is that exploration of the problem of practice. So I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about or give some helpful tips in how prospective students should be thinking about or their approach to their problem of practice. And I know, this narrowing is sometimes a complex process and journey.
I remember one of the first things that Dr. Karp said to us at Residency was, you're not going to solve the world's problems. So if you're going into this thinking that you're going to close the achievement gap, like get that out of your head. And that's hard to say to people who are educators when we know that that's very important. But when you're thinking about your particular problem of practice and your dissertation and your study, you have to really have a narrow focus on what aspect of your problem are you really going to be able to tackle? What are you really going to be able to do in your context to affect change? And that was really hard for me because I wanted to save the world.
Yeah. Tanya, thank you for saying that out loud. I think prospective students need to hear that. And I know that all 4 of you have heard us say, think of this dissertation as part of your life's work, right? To tackle that problem. So I appreciate you bringing that to light. Anybody else want to share tips, approaches to the POP?
I think broadening the scope was what saved me to the point before. I was originally thinking about student independence and agency, which is hugely broad. And Dr. Karp was actually my advisor, and she said, really think about a subject area. And that's where I focused in on math. And contextually within my school, I really started having a lot of conversations with teachers around what small issues they may want to solve. And I think one of the biggest pieces of support throughout the program early on was trying to think about it without using deficit language. And that became a really key piece of feedback as I moved forward in the process as well, and trying to work collaboratively with the teachers towards potentially solving a problem.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Anybody else want to chime in here?
Yeah, I'll just talk about, sort of partnering with some of my colleagues and watching them struggle in ways that I didn't. I came into my problem of practice with a genuine question and problem I could not solve. As a leader of a school district, I couldn't understand why some teachers were like really leaning into, investigating their pedagogy, and others were just like not interested. And like, it was like a problem I couldn't understand and I couldn't solve, and I needed to understand better. I had other people who came in and said, well, my problem is that I want to prove that this specific intervention will be successful in doing this thing. And when you come in that way, it's a lot more challenging. And they're going to tell you a lot at the beginning, like, no, but what's your problem? That's a solution. We don't talk about solutions. And I think it's important to think about that from the very start, like what really is the problem you're trying to solve? Because the gift of this program is giving you an opportunity to truly understand what underpins the pieces and those factors that are influencing your work and your situation in a way that you just can't from without giving this opportunity for sort of like external perspectives and questioning. So, really embrace that you don't have a solution, because that's kind of the point actually for the first couple of years.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Shanda. So just to recap, I'm hearing, managing and understanding the scope, defining the context, avoiding that deficit language and really explaining what is here, what instead of a lack. And then I loved Shanda really focusing on the problem and staying open-minded to avoid being automatic about solutions. So all really good tips. So if we could drill down a little bit, we've been talking about the problem of practice. We've talked a little bit about admissions. I would love for, some of you to share just a little bit of description around how the EdD courses are delivered. For example, are there synchronous sessions in these courses? And then maybe just an example or two of an assignment and like what that sort of looks like in the online course.
So I can start. Synchronous sessions happen. In my experience, I've had synchronous sessions about 2 or 3 times a semester for each of the courses that I've taken. So if it's 2 courses, or the first summer I took 3, it was about 6 to 9, depending across the courses. And every other week, there's generally a new set of readings for each course and for each session. And then every other week, there's generally a discussion prompt as well, a discussion board. And that was, for me, a really great opportunity to meet new people and interact with them in different ways, because you're responding to the prompt and other people, you're responding to others' responses, and people are responding to you, as well as interacting with the professor. And I would say that there's probably about 3 to 5 written assignments per course, generally a larger one at the end, one that may relate to the chapters that you're going to write along the way. That may be a component of it that you then incorporate. And I think the biggest piece for me was also just, again, the connection. There were a lot of group projects as well, and that connection with classmates, like I've worked with Noelle a lot, really allowed me to grow my thinking around whatever the topic at hand was.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Anybody want to add anything to the sort of picture of our courses and sessions and stuff?
I think one of the important things to know in the beginning of the program, maybe not so much in the last year, but in the first couple of years when you're taking all of the required courses and not necessarily the electives, those courses work together so that you very rarely, if ever, have a paper due on the same exact day. I know that the professors are very intentional at making sure if you have a paper due for one course, that the paper may not be due for the other course until the following week. So it didn't feel totally, I didn't feel totally inundated with work every single week, because they sort of weaved in and out of each other and were very dependent upon each other. They worked, the classes paralleled together.
Great. Thanks, Noelle. Anybody else have a thought on this?
I would just share, mostly because I have Carrie's ear at the moment, but that I have a couple of instructors that have started to kind of add in an opportunity to do synchronous discussions, and it's totally optional and you don't have to do it. But that opportunity to get into a Zoom room with my colleagues and like actually discuss back and forth the discussion prompt in a week has been incredibly fulfilling, and maybe one of my most favorite things I've done in this program. So those types of things aren't necessarily required. And to Jeffrey's point about the sync sessions that happen a few times a year, a few times a semester, those aren't necessarily required. They always record them and post them so you can see them later. But it is a great opportunity to really engage with your instructors as well as with your colleagues and your peers.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shanda. I think that's a really nice illustration of, and so that so the prospective students hear this, is one of the things that we pride ourselves on in this program is that we continue to iterate and take the feedback and make adjustments and changes and add new technologies and new approaches as things come about and change. So I'm glad, I love hearing about these new things that faculty are doing.
Carrie, can I just add something real quickly?
Yeah, please.
Jeffrey touched on it tangentially, but I think it is important to note that every single assignment that we have throughout the course and throughout the program relates to your dissertation. So a lot of the finals that you have in the first fall semester, you are just finding sources, creating your annotated bibliography. So every semester you're ending with a final that actually works directly towards your dissertation. I found that in my master's program, the work that I was doing felt superfluous because I really wanted to focus on my master's thesis, but I had all these other papers that I had to do that I didn't feel really bolstered what I was trying to study.
Great. Thanks for that, Noelle. So this question is actually for Noelle and Jeffrey, our alums on the panel. As you know, the program typically takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years, and we're just curious, can you share how long it took you to complete the program?
I completed it in 3.
Great.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I completed it in 3 years.
Okay, thanks. Just to give them some perspective. Couple other questions, and then we're going to open it up for questions from the perspectives who are on the webinar. When you think about the courses and the sessions we've just described, what skills or knowledge have you learned in the program that you've really felt like you've been able to apply in your professional context or in your career?
I can think of 2 specifically. One is this, and it really ties back to what we were talking about earlier in the way that you look at your problem. In really being able to look at your whole problem and not just what you think the problem is, but really digging deep and understanding all of the things in your context, things that are outside of your context that contribute to a problem. That's really changed my thinking when we go into, like I said earlier, I work in a research center. So just being able to, before we jump to what are we going to do? Just being able to pause and really systematically think about the problem is one thing that really has just changed the way I do navigate my work. The other is in the program, there are 3 research methods courses. The third one really is about evaluation. And so how do you evaluate whether a program is effective? How do you engage stakeholders? How do you know whether a program is efficient or effective, or should you expand it or should you continue it? So some of the techniques and the methods that we learned as a part of those research methods courses, really are very, very useful in my everyday life.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to share?
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Carrie. Sorry.
Nope. If you wanted to go ahead, Noelle, and then I was just going to jump to the last question, but go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think one of the less obvious or overt answers for this is that being in this program and being around other people and digging into this research really boost my own confidence. And so I felt at work where I may not have felt that I had a voice before, or I had imposter syndrome with speaking out about something I knew about, I feel a lot more comfortable, and it's opened a lot more opportunities for me to be able to demonstrate these skills. Great.
Oh, I love hearing this. And Tanya, I especially love hearing that methods is serving you. You know, that's near and dear to my heart. So to wrap up the panel's questions, I would love for each of you very briefly to share your favorite part of being a part of this program.
For me, it was making the connections with other students and being able to keep those connections. I have several different text chains going with multiple groups of people with whom I studied, and I think those are going to be lifelong friendships.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
And I'll add just some of the kind of recurring themes that we've talked about, but the confidence that you'll gain, because the work is hard. Like it is really hard. It's rigorous. And when you come out on the other side of completing a chapter and getting feedback, or getting through your comprehensive exams, or I went into like one of my biggest fears in this program was like getting to the research method stuff, because while it's near and dear to Carrie's heart, I was, a total, math phobia was kind of my middle name. But once you get through the program with all of the supports that are in place and you do it well, you have a different level of confidence about just how you navigate. So definitely, I would say that's one of my favorite parts of the program. There are lots, but I'll just share that one.
Tanya. Shanda or Noelle, anything to share?
So I agree with Jeffrey and Tanya completely. And I had a hard time with this question too, because it's like, I love every part of this. I love getting to dig into new readings every week and learn things in a way that I was kind of in a rut, I guess. I didn't realize it, but I wasn't seeking out new and interesting information and research. And I love that. I love digging in on my dissertation. I love sitting on Zoom with my advisor for like 2 hours while we like dissect apart this challenge I've come across or this topic that we're really, struggling with in my dissertation. And just being able to really feel like, I don't know, feel like I'm doing something, to Tanya's point about like, our dissertation can't change the world, but I think you find, it's got to be small, it's got to be manageable. But I think I'm finding like even those small little manageable pieces, as I'm able to apply it in my work, is kind of changing the world a little bit, like a tiny little step at a time. So this is one of the best decisions I've ever made. And I was very hesitant about doing it at the time. And I have done it with COVID descending in the middle of it. And even then, this has been definitely one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Great. Thank you, Shanda. Noelle, I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you want to share before we wrap up?
It's sort of just piggybacking off of what everyone else said, but I think I agree the most with Jeffrey, the lifelong friendships, not only with the people in my cohorts and my student peers, but also with my professors and especially my advisor. That has been probably the biggest gift that this program has given me.
That's fantastic. So I want to send a huge thank you to our 4 panelists for all of their wisdom and tips and insights. It's just, I'm so excited that I got to hear from all of you. And Sion and Tanya, I'm going to toss it back to you to moderate the Q&A.
Thank you so much for everyone, to the panelists and Dr. Prokosky. So I'll kick us off with the first question from Laura. And also the EdD panelists, feel free to jump in to answer some of the questions as well. Hello, is the JHU EdD online program accredited by the CAEP? If not, does the program have any other accreditation?
So my understanding is it's not accredited by that that body. That's something that the dean, it sits on the dean's desk and has been discussed. So I don't have any more information other than that.
All right, so next question we have, and this was answered, but this person might have signed in late. Do you need to be in full employment to do this program?
So our students, you don't need to be full-time, but you certainly need to be situated in a professional context where you would be able to explore the problems of practice as our panelists shared earlier.
Thank you, Dr. Prokosky. The next question from Kimberly is, are the course syllabus available ahead of time?
So typically we don't have them available to prospective students. If someone had a specific question, they could certainly, Sion, they could certainly reach out to me and I could handle that on a case-by-case basis. I mean, our current students can talk to, we do make them available. Once you're admitted in the program, we do make them available a little bit early so that they can do some planning, but not to sort of the general public, if that's what the person's referring to.
Thank you, Dr. Prokosky. So our next question that we have, and I think this is more for the panelists, how supportive are faculty and staff?
I can say that they've been a lifeline in the program and have made this program such a positive experience for me personally. I know everyone has spoken about the advising process. I'm, still regularly in touch with my advisors and texting with them and having conversations about, things outside of the program. But the professors for sure have been, like Dr. Borkowski, have been such a lifeline to the work and to my growth as a learner and researcher.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of that. I think one of the things that I loved about this program is that the professors really understand that you are still living a life. You're a full-time student, but you have a life outside of that. And I know that in one of my summers, I had a really traumatic life experience. I needed to take time off. I talked to Yolanda Abel. I talked to Carrie Burkowski, who was one of my professors at the time. And everyone was just like, no problem, take a deep breath, take a couple weeks, get back to us when you can. We will figure out what papers you have to do, what grades you need. We'll figure it all out. You take care of yourself. And so I think that demonstrates, that's the epitome of support.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions from Sally pertaining to the mind, brain, and teaching specialization. Can you tell me if there is a residency component where we would need to attend face-to-face at all? Also, I'm interested in educational neuroscience. Would you say that the mind, brain, and teaching course touches on this? The course overview looks as though it does. I just wanted to hear Shonda's take on this.
I love to have takes on things. I always like being asked my opinion. So there is no requirement, as far as I know, for a residency for any of the specializations. And then as far as the specific courses that you take as part of Mind Brain, you actually dig into the neuroscience quite deeply. I wouldn't say you're going to come out of this program able to read an fMRI scan and know what's happening with a learner, but what you will discover is how accurate and useful fMRI studies are, in what ways they can be applied and in what ways they can't. So it's a series of courses. Right now I'm taking cognitive processes of literacy and numeracy, and it has been incredibly interesting. They're all my favorite classes, but it's hard not for me not to have really have your specializations be your absolute favorite. But yeah, the entire mind brain teaching program is all about that neurobiology of learning and understanding kind of what the research says really truly, and how you can apply that in operationalize that in an educational setting.
Great. So the next question we have is, how many students are there per cohort?
So it varies from year to year, as you can imagine. It's usually between, like this year, we have around 65. We have had upwards of 75. Just keep in mind, when I say that number, our course sizes tend to stay at the, 12 to 15 students per course, depending on. So just to give you a sense of the class size.
Thank you. The next question we have is, and a lot of your panelists are involved more in the K-12 education. Do you have a lot of students who teach at the graduate school level?
So we definitely, over the past, I would say 3 to 4 years, we have certainly attracted more students in, I would say, the higher education space. I don't know specifically graduate school. We definitely have a few that are coming from graduate education, but we have many more students coming from all sorts of roles in higher ed, not just faculty, but, admissions, career services, etc. So yeah, so keep in mind, the School of Ed has a history, long history of K-12 expertise. And so, we're sort of expanding that strength, and you're starting to see it in our attraction of different kinds of students.
Carrie, I might just jump in and add to that I find myself in most of my classes being the only K-12 person. I often sort of get things thrown to me because they're like, well, Chanda, you're in the public context. Like, what's that look like there? I think a significant number of my peers in my classes right now do come from the higher ed setting.
All right, so the next question we have is, how possible is it to have a focus or a problem that is international and has a connection to other fields such as psychology and public health and social protection?
I mean, it's hard for me to answer that question without having, a one-on-one discussion. I will say, and these students and alums can attest to their own experiences, we situate these problems in a system which is intricate and interconnected. And so it's not that surprising that there'd be so much crossover, whether it's international or different disciplines. So I think that's entirely possible. We would just need to, Jeffrey was talking earlier about ways to scope the problem and think about how to define that problem. And so we would just need to do some of that work. It's not as clear cut to say it can't be this or that. It's just sort of talking through, as Shanda said, the key is to really understand and define what that problem is.
Thank you. And the next one goes to the two alums. How did the two alums who spoke complete the program in 3 years? Is that exceptional or common as an experience?
For me, at the beginning of each course, I puzzled out what the 15 weeks or so was going to look like. And then that's really how I structured my time. So I knew, I wanted to make it work within 3 years, just given personally and professionally. But then I think for me, it's more about drilling down to each semester and looking at how each course dovetailed with each other. I think Noelle spoke about this in terms of, when assignments were due, and professors tried to make sure that assignments were not due on the same dates. So that for me was what helped me get through the program. I just made a simple, in Google Docs, I made a calendar for the 3 months across the semester, and really just, again, puzzled out where assignments fell.
Yeah, I think I kept it within the 3-year frame because that's what I told myself I would give up my social life for 3 years and that's it. But I do think, there were times where I wanted to give up. And I can't speak to how many people graduate within 3 years, but I know the people, Shanda said, find your people. The people that I worked with in my cohorts all graduated in 3 years.
I would just say, if I might add, Tanya and Sion, real quickly, keep in mind that when our students and alums are saying 3 years, it's 3 full years, which includes summers. So we're not just talking about, 2 semesters, a fall and spring semester each year. The other thing I will, just in the interest of being transparent, we have had more students over the last couple of years who have extended programs so that they're graduating in 4 years. And probably to nobody's surprise in this webinar, it has a lot to do with the pandemic, which has created lots of challenges in so many different ways.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Bukowski. Our next question, I noticed that the candidates were US centric. Does the program have students working and living in international contexts?
Absolutely. We have students. I'm so proud and excited to say that we have students all over the world, in lots of different countries and lots of different corners of the world. And some are international students living in their, what is considered their home country at the moment. We also have US students who are located in international contexts. We have international students who are located in, in North America. So yes, this panel happens to be US, but definitely we have international students. And I'll say, Sion and Tanya, if there are folks on this webinar who are interested in speaking to some of our international students, that would be an opportunity to reach out to me and I can make those connections for individuals.
Thank you. Next question we have, I missed the beginning. Did the panelists summarize their problems of practice or do they have any advice for how they refined their POP or pivoted away from one approach to another?
I'll just say, I forget who mentioned this earlier from our panel, but the notion of just trust the process. Your coursework and your professors, and once you are assigned your advisor, all of those processes that were put in to place helped me refine my problem of practice. What I would recommend, one of the suggestions that came my way was to keep like a version history. So I have all versions of my problem of practice in a Google folder, and they're all dated, so I can actually see how my problem of practice has changed. But I think that the program is designed to help you shape that problem of practice.
I'd agree with Tanya about, yeah, you really just trust the process. They're going to lead you down the path to explore it. So just embrace it. And then I would just say that, like, those who got to see it, my problem in practice is looking at teacher change management during a global crisis. I think you can imagine that when I started this program in 2019, the part about the global crisis wasn't on there. I spent my first year looking at how teachers manage change, and then like thought we were on a really great path for exploring it. And then the pandemic hit, and I kind of had to take a pause it was almost 4 or 5 months to work with my advisors and my professors to say, like, okay, so what has changed about my problem and what hasn't, to get to where I now am. So, I'm maybe not quite on the same schedule as my cohort mates at this point, but I feel really good about where I am. And I'm going to be able to kind of explore this problem in a really interesting time. So yeah, trust the process, and you got to just be sort of willing to pivot. You got to be willing to just sort of sit back and say, okay, so that happened. All right, so what does that mean? And really trust your advisors and your faculty are incredibly supportive in helping you figure that out.
Thank you. So the next question we have is to all of the student panelists. After completing the program, do you plan to stay in your current role or transition into other work? Do some graduates move on to faculty positions in higher education?
Well, I started the program as a 10th grade teacher, and I am still sitting in my classroom as a 10th grade teacher. So my job has not changed. However, the opportunities that I've been afforded have changed. So I'm doing a lot more trainings, not only within my school, but my union, publishing, working on different projects. So it's definitely created opportunities that I never anticipated. I love being in the classroom, so I don't want that to change though.
I would agree with Noelle in terms of thinking about just and adding on that, thinking about research, your own research and its contribution to the field. And that was a huge piece of the program. And my advisors worked with me on that throughout the process in terms of what my thinking and my research, not just for myself, but in the broader sense to the field. So it's really allowed me to just think a little bit more deeply about, to Noelle's point, what are possible publications or continued research studies. I know I spoke to Dr. Borkowski over the summer about something that I was thinking about. So it's allowed me to continue thinking outside the box in that way.
And I am still in the program and not anticipating leaving my current role once I am done. But just like the other panelists have said, I do anticipate being able to have different kinds of opportunities, whether that's publication of my work, or right now, in order to be a principal investigator on research, you have to have a terminal degree. So in my current role, I work on other people's research, and hopefully I'll be able to, apply for my own grants and research studies after I'm done the program. So I don't anticipate a change in my job, just a change in the kinds of opportunities that come my way as a part of my job.
Okay, so, the next question we have is for both Dr. Borkowski and the EdD panelists. Does the program train students in both qualitative and quantitative research methods? Does the program or the faculty favor or prefer one or the other?
That's such a good question. And so we do our best through our current research methods courses, which number in 3, to introduce students to different methodologies, which include the quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method. And I would love to hear the students' perspective and alums' perspective on this, but our faculty are very diverse in their own training. And so I don't believe that the program favors one methodology over the other. I think at the beginning of this program, there was a push towards mixed method for lots of reasons we don't need to go into, but over time, we've really honored the sort of systematic approach to research, which is to honor the research questions and the appropriate method to answer those research questions. So
I would agree, Carrie. I think I've been really pushed in my methods piece to be looking at what is the question I'm trying to answer and what are the tools that are needed to answer that specific question. So I feel we've been, trained in all 3 pretty well and strongly encouraged to match our methods to our problem.
I would agree with that.
I would agree also. I think through the coursework and through working with my advisors, it was really all about what methods worked organically with the research questions.
And I might just add, sorry, that like your advisor tends to have like an expertise in a certain type of research generally. And so what's great is that when your question necessitates an expertise that maybe they don't have, they're helping you find the people who do have that expertise. So you make sure you have the support, even if it's not directly with your advisor.
Thank you all for your responses. The next and last question that we have, can a student be successful in this program if they don't have a traditional K through 12 teaching job or experience?
I mean, I can answer and then I'd love to hear from the panelists. I would say absolutely. I mean, you heard from Shanda earlier that, most of her peers are not coming from K-12 and, her cohort is being successful. I'll also speak from my own experience. So I was in the 2013 cohort, never stepped foot as a teacher in K-12. I'm embarrassed to admit this as a higher ed faculty, but never had even a learning theory course or an education, degree. And I was able to successfully move through the program. So, but I would love to hear from the students and alums on that question.
My background is early childhood. So prior to my current job, I taught kindergarten and pre-kindergarten in a childcare program, but most of my career was spent directing childcare programs. And as I mentioned, I now work in an applied research center, and we do work with other state departments of education. So I don't have a traditional K-12 experience, and I feel like my role has really been honored in the program with my communication with my advisors and my professors and helping me to shape my dissertation and my intervention. So I don't think you have to be a K-12, a traditional K-12 person to be successful in the program. And in my cohort, there are lots of folks that are not in K-12 as well.
Thank you so much. Well, it looks like we do have some additional questions pending, but we will ask that you email those questions to us. You'll see the contact information being shared. I do want to say thank you all for joining us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Bukowski, and all of our student panelists as well. We truly appreciate your interest in Johns Hopkins School of Education. To all those that are considering or applying to the program, we look forward to hearing from you and receiving your applications. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.